And rest of you, you should learn from those who just came forward to explain. Okay, all right. Very good morning, all. Thanks for joining today. So yesterday we learned about the basics and fundamentals of IAM, Identity and Access Management. And today, let's just go ahead and do some hands-on work with Identity and Access Management, and let's understand a little more in depth of how policies work and how do you define the policies, and also how do you create roles which can be attached to EC2 instances and things like that. So with this, we will close IAM with today, and tomorrow we are going to start with a entirely new topic, and we'll start with S3 tomorrow. All right, so let me just pull up my screen. Just give me a second. So I'm here. Okay, I have logged into my AWS account, and this is my account. Okay, triple as RBL. This is my account ID, and the user, the principal that is logged in currently is an IAM user, right? So what is a principal? A principal is the identity who is accessing the AWS service or resources, right? That's called the principal. So in this case, the principal is RPL admin. So that's my user that I have logged in. Okay, got it. So now how do I access IAM? Let's go search for IAM. You'll get this. Just go ahead and click on IAM. You'll be taken to the IAM console, and you will see a dashboard, a quick dashboard, which has some information about your account on the right side, such as your account ID, your account alias, which is SSSRPL, and what is the sign-in URL. And if you have to sign in, you can just use this URL, or you give this user, you give the sign-in URL to your users. They can sign in directly through this. You have some quick links, and you have some tools, policy simulator, and so on and so forth. Then you get some additional information, right, about best practices for IAM documentations, then related services such as AWS organizations, single sign-on, and so on and so forth. And on the left side, you see a list of menu items such as user groups, users, roles, policies, identity providers, account settings, and some reports, right, such as access reports, credential reports, service control policies, and so on and so forth. And on the middle, you get to see some recommendations that AWS is making given the current posture of your account. So in my current posture, I have a root user, but I don't have an MFA for my root user, right? And then I have, this is myself, right? Which is this RPL admin is my IAM user, and I either don't have an MFA for myself. Okay, in fact, I created an MFA and then I deleted it because I exposed my the QR code for my MFA. So I mean, that's not a best practice. So you have to do an MFA access. You have to do an MFA enrollment when you're alone without exposing your screen to anybody. And that's the whole reason why I had to go and revoke my MFA access. And after that, I didn't reinstate my MFA access. That's okay. I will reinstate it back later privately. I'll do that. Yeah, and also it gives you some warnings around deactivate or delete your access keys unused for more than a year, right? That's okay. I'll go ahead and do all of that. Now it also gives me a summary of how many user groups I have. I have 2 user groups, I have 3 users, I have 11 roles, 5 policies, and 0 identity providers. Okay, all right. So let's go to user groups. groups, right? So, so these are a couple of user groups that I have. As I said yesterday, user group is a group, right? At the end of the day, it's just a group which will allow you to group multiple users together, and you can manage permissions for those groups. For those, you don't have to manage the permissions for those individual users. Rather, you could manage the permissions for those groups, which will get impacted for the individual users, right? So that's the advantage of using user groups. And examples of user groups are, if you take an organization, sales, you can create a user group for sales. You can create a user group for HR. You can create a user group for technology, marketing, finance, and so on and so forth, right? And each can have some sort of a granular permissions assigned to it. But anyways, in this case, I just took some hypothetical examples, but actually you will not have, the sales team, finance team accessing your AWS account, because it's going to be the central IT administration team or IT operations team who's going to use it. So when it comes to IT operations, it will be the operations team, who will have a group. It will be the development team, who will have a group. It will be the testing team who will have another group, and things like that. Product management who will have another group, something like that. Okay. So creating a group is simple. You can just go create a group. I can say dev team. Okay. And you can add users to the dev team, but I'm not going to do it. And you can attach permissions directly to that. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Let's come back to that. Let me just go ahead and create a group. I've just created a group called dev team. It has nothing in it. It has no users, no permissions attached to it, right? So we'll come back to this. And there's also something called an ARN, right? Again, ARN is a global resource identifier, resource notation for AWS resources. For any AWS resources, it is something like this. It starts with ARN. ARN means Amazon resource notation or something. Okay, AWS ARN. Yeah, sorry, resource names. My bad. So it's called AWS Amazon Resource Names. Uniquely identify any AWS resources. So you take any resource in AWS, it will have a unique ARN, okay? And it will have a format. It has a specific nomenclature and a notation that it follows. It starts with ARN, which is just a plain text. And you have something called a partition. A partition is nothing but, if you take AWS, if you see AWS, it's all the AWS regions that you see. Okay, except the China region, right? So because China has got separate policies, so that's the reason China is separate. But otherwise, all the other regions other than China region is identified by just AWS. So then if you see AWS-CN, it means it is one of the China regions. Then if you see AWS-US-gov, it means that if you remember, on the initial classes, I would have explained about the global infrastructure of AWS, where you also have government clouds, right? Gov cloud. It's called Gov cloud. So the Gov clouds are used in the US region. So where the US federal government or the state government, right? For them, since they want to, store data very securely, and they don't want to share the region with other commercial system. When I say commercial system, it is the rest of the world. Since they want the government data to be very, very secure, so what AWS has done is AWS has created separate regions, which is only for government purpose, right? So where the government customers, such as the federal government, they come and host their services they host their resources on Gov Cloud. So that's the AWS US Gov. That's the partition. Anyways, then service, next is the service. Service is the actual service name, right? Like S3, EC2, IAM, and so on and so forth. Then region. The fourth one is region. Region is nothing but the region code, which is US East 1, US East 2, AP South 1, AP South 2 will be coming shortly. Okay, and then account ID, right? So the 12-digit account ID, that's the next fifth one. Then the sixth one is resource ID or resource type. Okay, that's the sixth one, which is nothing but it could be an EC2 instance ID, right? Such as the source ID, which is the EC2 instance ID, or the volume ID, EBS volume ID, right? That's how it is. That's how the whole notation works. Okay, so if you see here, everything is split by a colon. If you want to leave something, you just ignore it and it will be a double colon, right? So that's how you create. That's how the ARNs are represented. So if you see here, this is the ARN colon AWS colon the service name, which is IAM. In this case, AWS means all the other regions other than Gulf Cloud and China region. So this is Mumbai region, right? So that's why it's called AWS. And then colon account ID, because it's a global resource. So, okay, this is one more thing, important thing that you all need to understand is there are some services which are global in nature. Unlike you take EC2 or EBS, which has which is restricted to a certain specific region, correct? And an availability zone. Unlike that, IAM is a global service. So when I say global service, an IAM role or an IAM user or an IAM, policy is not just restricted to one specific region alone. So that is the reason the moment you navigate to IAM, you will see global here, right? You will not see a specific region, right? You won't be able to select a specific region, right? Whereas if I go to some other service like say EC2, yeah, you will see Mumbai here, right? And you will be able to change the region. We'll go from Mumbai to some other region, right? But the moment I navigate to IAM, it will quickly change to global because it is not tied to one specific region alone. Okay, please remember that. Okay, don't ask the question that, sir, how do I create a user in Mumbai region? How do I create a user in North Virginia region? How do I create a user in a role in Singapore region? No, it doesn't work that way. When you create a user, when you create a role, when you create a policy, it is global in nature. It can apply pretty much to any region. Okay, because it is not a regional service. It is called a global service. So that's the difference that you need to understand. So there are two types of services: a regional service such as EC2, EBS, and all the others that you see. They're all specific to regions because they physically are present within India, right? If you take Mumbai region, if you take EC2, if you create an EC2 instance, that EC2 instance is present in Mumbai. And if you provision one EC2 instance tomorrow in Hyderabad, once the Hyderabad region comes in, then that EC2 instance is provisioned in the Hyderabad region. Physically, it's present somewhere in Hyderabad. Though we don't know where the location is, but it is somewhere. If you look at the map, it is present in probably one data center, which is located in probably 100-kilometer radius. It is physically present here, and the data is not going out of India. Okay, due to the regulations and due to the way the data sovereignty is maintained by AWS, right? So the data never goes out of the region. But if you take IAM, IAM is a global service, okay, and it is applied across. Okay, it's just a metadata, right? I mean, it only controls and governs the way you access resources, you access your AWS platform, right? I mean, you're not physically storing anything within IAM, right? You're not doing anything, right? It's just that you're creating a username with some credentials and you're assigning some policies to it. And the moment that user logs in, IAM will tell you what is allowed, what is not allowed, right? So that's what IAM does. Okay, all right. So that's how. So that's what you see in the user groups. It has an IAM. It has an ARN associated with it, and right now I don't have users and permissions. So now let's go and create a simple user. So if I go to users and create an add user, yeah, you will see this page and create a username. I'm just going to say RPL user, right? That's the name that I'm going to give. Okay. And here you have two types of credentials that you can have, right? So if you see this bottom portion, select AWS access type, select how these users will primarily access AWS. If you choose only programmatic access, it does not prevent users from accessing the console using an assumed role. Access keys and auto generator provided in the last step. Okay, so now you need to understand two things very clearly here, right? Who can log into the console? Can somebody answer? We learned it yesterday.
User.
Principal.
Yeah, right. No, more specifically, I know principal, but more specifically, what type of principal can log into the console?
Users one. Users.
Users. Yeah, correct. Perfect. It's users, correct? So it can either be a root user or it can be an IAM user, correct? So right now, what we are creating now is an IAM user. It's called the IAM user. Okay. So now an IAM user can log into the console. Okay. But now for the IAM user to be able to log into the console, he needs some sort of a password, correct?
Yes,
Without
sir.
password,
Yes, sir.
because when I go ahead and open the console, it will ask for password, correct? Username, password. Okay. So now that is where first mechanism to log into use console is you need to have a password. So you have to check the password. But having said that, even if you don't have the password, if you if you only use programmatic access, even then a user will be able to log into the console by assuming the role. Okay, I'll explain that later. I mean, don't get confused. You can also assume role and log into, but you can't log in straight away for the first time into an AWS console using the IAM user if you don't have a username password. For the first time login, you definitely need a username password. There has to be some IAM user or a root user who can log into the console for the first time. And from there, it is possible to switch role, right? If you select a switch role and you can give a IAM user and you can just assume a role and then you can log in, right? That is possible. But anyways, we'll come back to those are a little advanced topics. I don't want to confuse you. But for now, just assume that unless and until you have a username password, you won't be able to log into the console. That is the reason you see here, password is for AWS management console access. Okay, and either you can auto generate a password or it can be a custom password, right? I'm just going to say custom password. I'll just give, yeah, so make it a bit complex password. If I don't make it complex, then it will give me some error messages saying it does not conform to the account password policy, right? So now how do you set the account password policy? If you go here, account settings in IAM, you see something called password policy here. Okay, you can change the password policy. Here it says minimum password is 8 characters, requires at least one uppercase, one lowercase alphabet, at least one number, and one non-alpha numeric character, such as some special character. Okay. The reason why you need to have this kind of a password is it's a strong password, right? Brute force algorithms won't be able to break this password. If you give the password as your name, okay, it's very easy to break that password because a hacker will be able to easily guess it. And there are brute force algorithms, password breaking algorithms that a hacker can use and he can quickly identify your password, right? So you can change this also and you can make it more complex. Okay, anyways, I'll leave this to you to explore. I'm just going to go back to users. Let me recreate that user. I'm going to say RPL user, and I'll say password, and I'll say give a custom password. Yeah, and if you want your users to reset the password the next time they log in, you can give this, right? So after I create this and I log in next time, it will force me to change the password next time. And this is for new employees, right? When you have new employees and you create an IAM user for them, you give a temporary password for the first time, and then you check this, and next time they log in, it will prompt for a password change, and they have to change their password. That's more secure, right? I'll just uncheck this for now. Okay, that's one. Second thing is there's something called access key for programmatic access. How many of you have worked with GitHub?
Sairam, brother.
Yeah, Sairam.
Yeah, SG63.
You have
I know.
SG63. Yes. You have worked with GitHub, right? Okay, cool. So in GitHub, when you're setting up your repo from your local workstation,
yes.
And when you want to basically make a clone of your repo, right, on your local, so that you can basically pull and push.
Okay.
You must have used something called a token, API token, correct?
Yeah, yes, sir. It is recently launched by Git.
Yes, correct. So there's something called a token that you can use, right? Or something called a API key, right? You can use that API key. Okay, so now when you log into GitHub, you will use your username password. I'm just doing a little detour. If you log into GitHub, you're using your username password. Yeah, I'm now logged into my GitHub using my username password. Okay. But if you want to kind of do a pull or a push, right? Git pull or a push from your development environment or from your workstation, then you can't use your username password. Rather, you have to use some sort of a key that GitHub provides, correct? So
Yes,
yeah,
sir.
thank you. Thanks for that. Yeah, you can mute yourself. Thank you. So now it's in a very similar way. You can use an access key. An access key is nothing but it will have a pair of access ID and a secret key that you use, which you will use while you set up your command line interface, or you use an SDK, or you use an API. If you're using API, CLI, or SDK and other development tools, then you need to have the programmatic access, because what AWS does is it exposes a lot of APIs and SDKs to automate AWS platform, and you'll be able to use an access key here. You need an access key here. You won't be able to use your password there. So that's the reason. For this user, you can also select a access key. Okay, for now, just select it. I'll tell you how this is going to be useful in the CLI session, right? I mean, when we set up the CLI session, this will come handy. Okay, for now, you can just go ahead and use that and click on next permissions. Okay, so now here in the permissions, you can add this user to a particular group. Okay, just say that you add it to the dev team. Okay, or if you're not planning to use groups, you don't have to add this user to the group. You can copy the permissions from an existing user. So for example, all within space, Prasanna, RPL admins, these are all some of the users that I have. You can just simply select one user. So the permissions of this user will get copied directly. Or you can attach a permission directly, an existing policy directly. Okay, so now this is where it's important to understand what these permissions are. Okay, so now if you see here, AWS has got a set of managed policies. IAM managed policies. Okay, so now if you see here, what is a managed policy? When you need to set the permission for an identity in IAM, you must decide whether to use an AWS managed policy, a customer managed policy, or an inline policy. Okay, so now what AWS has done is, in order to keep things simple, they have come up with a bunch of policies. Okay, and by default, those policies are available in your account. Any account has got those managed policies. Okay, like for example, this administrator access amplify, Alexa for business device setup. So these are all some policies that are available by default, which you can search for. Like say, for example, I want to give access to only S3 to my user, right? I can just search for S3 and I can select the right access, read only access or full access, right? Or only a DMS Redshift S3 role, right? So these are some of the policies that are offered by AWS, and AWS manages the semantics of this policy or the syntax of this policy. Okay. This is just to kind of bootstrap, and you can use one of these existing policies if it fits your bill, or you can create your policy by yourself. You can just click on create policy and you can create your policy by yourself. I will come to the policy shortly. For now, I'm just going to select, say, an administrator access. Okay, and attach that and say next. Tag, just say user, just say name, give a name to it, RPL user, and next review, and just say create user, right? So when you create user, just review this stuff. It's a username is RPL user. Access type is both programmatic access and management control access. And what is the policy that is attached to this? It's a managed policy. And what are managed policies? Their managed policies are designed to provide permissions for many common use cases. Okay, and there are a lot of managed policies that AWS offers, and AWS manages it all by themselves, right? You don't have to write that policy. AWS provides that policy, right? If you want, you can ignore that policy and you can just go ahead and create your own policy from scratch, which is also possible. So in that case, it will be a customer managed policy. If you create your own policy, it will be a customer managed policy. And there's a tag. Okay, now let me just go ahead and create the user. Okay, so when I create a user, something interesting is going to happen. The user got created, and AWS asks you to download a CSV file. So just read this very carefully. You successfully created the user shown below. You can view and download user security credentials. You can also email users and instructions for signing into the AWS Management Console. This is the last time these credentials will be available to download. However, you can create new credentials at any time. What does that mean? It means that it's like creating the key pair, right? And the EC2. So when you create a key pair, at the end of the key pair creation process, AWS allows you to download that private key file. That is the one and only opportunity AWS gives you to download the private key file for the sake of security. Okay, because if AWS allows somebody to keep downloading the same private key file any number of times, then the security will potentially get breached. Any user who has illegal access to the account will be able to re-download the private key file, and that guy will be able to use the private key file to log into all the EC2 instances and create an havoc, right? Which is not the best practice. That is the reason AWS allows you to download it one and only time, the first time. So the same funda applies here as well. When you create a new IAM user, this is the credentials that AWS shows. So in fact, if you see, this is the secret access key. This is the access ID for this particular RPL user. which we just created. And this RPL user will have a password, which I know. Okay, and this is the access key, and this is the secret access key. So now it will allow me to download the CSV. So the moment I download the CSV, it is going to store it in my local. When I just go here, I'll just right click and say open with Microsoft Excel. So when I open it with Microsoft Excel, yeah, see this, it allows me to download this, right? So it will tell me what is my user ID, what is the access key and secret key. If somebody has this, right? Somebody has these three, my account is compromised. That's the reason the CSV file should be kept very, very secure. Like you have to store it in a secure location so that it does not get compromised. Okay, let's come back. So now it will allow me to download that only once. And if I click on close, I will lose the opportunity to download this. So we'll see that. I'll just click on close. So if I go back, I have this RPL user. So when I click on this RPL user, okay, I've attached the administrator access to my RPL user. It will tell me creation time and so on and so forth. This is the ARN. Groups, I've not added it to any group so far, but you can also do that. Security credentials. You see here, this is the access key that was created, but it does not show the secret for this access key, correct? Because if somebody knows the secret for this access key, they'll be able to get full access for this user programmatically or using the CLI or through Python or whatever SDK that AWS offers. So that's why even if administrator goes here, he won't be able to see the secret key from here. He will only be able to see the access key. He will only be able to see the access key. Just a second, sorry. Yeah, so that's the thing. And but if you want, you can delete this, right? I mean, if you see that, if you feel that this key is compromised, you can just go ahead and delete, and all access to that using this key will be terminated. And you can create another access key if you want. And now, if you see again here also, you will get to see the secret key only once, right? If I don't copy this, that's gone. I won't be able to see it second time. I won't be able to see that secret key for the second time. It's gone. Okay, so that's the that's how secure it is. Okay, so now let's come back. Okay, let me just go ahead and delete the second one that I created, which is this one, right? Yeah. Deactivate it and copy and paste this secret access key and then say delete. Yeah, so that's deleted. Okay, just read through this, right? I mean, when you access the console, see, AWS makes it a lot simpler, right? I mean, it gives you some good visual cues of how the keys work. So just read through this. It's very simple. You don't have to read through pages and pages of documentation. It's very simple. Okay, all right. So now I have a user. I have some sort of access assigned to my user, and I can basically access it, right? So now let me just log out and log in, right? I'm going to log out of my primary user. Okay, so the reason why I was able to create this user from this IAM user is because that IAM user, the RPL admin IAM user, has got administrator privileges, which means that administrator user can create additional IAM users. Okay, so let me just go ahead and click on management console. I'm going to say SSS RPL, that's my account alias. And IAM user is RPL user. Password is my password. Yeah, and then click on sign in. Okay, probably my password is wrong. Let me log in back as my admin. Let me go back to users, RPL user, security credentials, console password is enabled. Let me just go enable custom password. Apply. Okay. Let me try now. Okay, I'll open a different browser. Okay, because I'll keep both open. Open a different browser. Open this. Okay, I'll say RPL user password. I hope I got it right this time. Yes, I got it. Now, if you see, RPL user is logged into this account. Okay, and since the RPL user has got administrator access, I can perform any action, right? I mean, which is allowed for an administrator. I can go to even IAM, right? I can just view even IAM. Yeah, I can view all of this, right? I can view the users. I can view the roles that are created and everything, because RPL user is also an admin. Okay, so now let's work with a bit of a policies. Okay, so now I'm going to the policy permissions of my RPL user, and now I want to restrict the permissions of the RPL user. Okay, so what I can do is I can go ahead and simply delete this administrator access, detach it. So right now, RPL user has 0 permissions, which means what is the first rule in IAM?
To deny everything by default.
Yeah, perfect. Should deny everything by default. Okay, let's see. Let's go back and refresh. Oops, I lost permission. I lost all the permission that I had. If I click on anything, I won't have any permission on anything. You're not authorized to perform this operation. See, you click on anything, right? You go to account, nothing, you need permissions. Click on organization, you don't have permissions, right? If you click on billing dashboard, you need permissions, nothing. I have 0 permissions. Okay, so rule number 1 is clear. By default, AWS gives no permission. It denies, implicitly denies everything. I've not done anything, right? Let me go back and I'll show you the user. This is my user, RPL user. I just created a user. There's a username password for my user, and I've given the sign-in permissions to the user, but I have no permissions, which means AWS denies everything by default. So rule number 1 is satisfied. Any questions? Any doubts? Any confusions?
No, sir.
Can't be simpler than this, right?
That's clear.
Okay, perfect. Okay, all right. So now let's try and, yeah, somebody had a question.
Yes, sir. Actually, one user given the administrative permissions, he cannot Maintain the other users. How it is possible?
Yeah, he can maintain other users. No, I am an admin user, right? RPL admin is not
Can
a
I
root user, it's an IAM user. Is an admin user. If you see, I just created this RPL user from RPL admin. I'm not logged in as the root. Now RPL admin is a administrator user. You see, it's an administrator access. So
Okay.
if you have administrator access, you will be able to manage the other users also, other IAM users also.
No. I'm not. I'm asking not maintain the other users. It is possible?
Yes, you can then restrict it. Then you will be able to restrict. You'll be able to create your policy in such a way that you don't give IAM access.
Okay. Only administrative permissions I can give into only administrative permissions, but my condition is not maintain the other users.
Yeah. So then what you need to do? Let me ask this question. Okay, you give administrator access. Okay, what is an administrator access doing? It is satisfying your rule 2, which is you are explicitly allowing. So now that user should have administrator access, but at the same time, it should not have access to manage other users. What should you do? This is where you apply the third rule, where you
Number
go ahead
3.
and deny it, explicitly
Okay.
deny.
Okay.
Okay, you can also do that. No, if you go to that RPL admin, I'm the RPL admin. I can go add a new policy. It can be an inline policy. What I can do is I can select IAM. I'm going to come to this shortly. Okay. Anyways, but since you asked, I'm just telling you this. All IAM actions. Okay. And here, if you see, you can switch to deny. I'm now denying this by default, but explicitly I'm denying all of this. And then I'm saying next is review policy. You can also see a JSON of this. Okay, resources is all resources. Just make it all. Okay, so now if you see, go to the JSON. I am denying IAM : star, which means anything in IAM I'm denying. Even though it's allowed in the administrator, I'm still denying it because deny takes more precedence than allow, right? And explicit allow on all the resources. Now, if I apply this, it'll be denied. Okay. Okay. All right. Let me come back. Okay. So now rule number 1 is clear, right? By default, everything is denied. So now I'm not able to do anything. As an RPL user, I'm not able to do anything. Okay. So now I want to give permission to only EC2. So now let me start writing some policies for that. Okay. So now I'll just say add permissions. Okay. So here, as I said, there are three things that are there, right? Now let me ignore the first 2. That's okay. Those are pretty simplistic, but I want to focus on attach existing policies directly. So the existing policies are a mix of, you see 729 results here, which is a mix of both managed policies, which is managed by AWS, plus policies that the user has created. Okay. So now what you can do is I'm going to create a new policy. I don't want to use a managed policy. Rather, I will create a new policy by myself. So I'll go click on create a policy. It will open up a new page. And then here you will get either a visual editor or a JSON. Okay, let's first do it in the visual editor and see, compare it with JSON so that you understand the JSON syntax. Okay, because I want all of you to learn the syntax of JSON so that you'll be able to create these policies and edit these policies, right? So visual editor you can use, but not all the time, right? If you need a console access to use visual editor, but tomorrow you are automating it using, say, CloudFormation, or you using Terraform or any other management automation tools. So then you should be familiar with the JSON syntax of creating the policies. Okay, so now here it will ask me to select a service, right? So you can search for EC2, just search for EC2, give EC2. Okay, then the next thing is actions, right? you can go ahead and so again, as I said, IAM gives you very granular control over the entire AWS, right? So which means that there are a set of actions that AWS provides. Okay, so now what are those actions? Let's search for those, right? AWS, IAM, actions, right? If you search for this, so then you will see this, right? So just Google for it, you will see this first link. So it has an actions table. Yeah, so if you see this, just going to go to the EC2, AWS EC2. This is by service, okay? Yeah, if I just click on EC2, yeah, what are the actions that are defined by EC2 by AWS? These are the actions, right? It's a huge list. Okay, it's a huge list of actions along with descriptions, right? So if you see, for example, let's take one action of okay, delete key pair, right? You don't want anyone to delete the key pair, so you can actually put a deny on delete key pair action. It grants permission to delete a key pair by removing the public key from EC2. Access level is right. Okay, so these are some of the conditions that it has. Okay, so now you can, this is a API or an automation reference table that you can use. Okay, and if you want to look it up for a different service, you can also look it up for a different service, like say IAM itself, right? What are the actions that are possible for IAM itself? Because at the end of the day, it also has AWS IAM. Okay, I think it will be identity and access management, I believe. Yeah, identity and access management, if you see this. Yeah, so these are the granular actions that IAM can perform on itself. Okay, so let me go back. So here, again, as you saw, there are access levels, right? Write, read, permission management, and so on and so forth. These are the access levels. So now you will see the access levels here. List, read, tagging, write, right? And if you kind of expand right, you will see all the right permissions here. See, so it's so granular, right? Every bit of an action has a granular access permission within AWS, right? You'll be able to control it at that level. Okay, you see so many actions that are possible in EC2 for write. Whereas for read, also you have so many actions that is possible. Okay. Anyways, and list is to list on the screen, correct? When you go to the EC2 console, you see the list of EC2 instances. So that's what this whole thing is all about. Okay. Okay. Anyways, I mean, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say all EC2 actions, right? Just to keep it simple. I'm just going to say all EC2 actions. And I can come down for the next one. Here for the resources, what I can do is I can say specific resources, right? Resources is nothing but the resources that are running, the ones which are kind of created by the users, correct? Those ones, the EC2 instance, volume, keys. So these are the resources, correct? So now you can also apply this for a specific resource, right? So you want to say that this permission applies only to a specific EC2 instance, you can say that. Okay. So now you can say here, right? I mean, you have not specified resources, add an ARN. So you can actually add the ARN of that particular EC2 instance, and it will only apply to that particular EC2 instance. But let me add it to all resources, right? and it will give you a small pop-up saying, as a best practice, define permissions for only specific resources and specific accounts. Alternatively, you can grant least privilege using condition keys. Okay, that's fine. And you can add some resource conditions. You can say this is allowed only in a region, some region, right? Or it can come only from some source IP, or MFA is required for this, right? Something like that. You can give a condition there. You can give a condition key and you can define the condition. There's a separate syntax for that. See, the moment you practice one or two, then you will find a lot of examples on the AWS website on how the policies are created. But all I want you to do now is to understand the concepts of, you know, how a policy looks like, right? What are the 4 different sections of a policy? The service, actions, resources, and request conditions. Okay, so these are the 4 things that you allow, that you create in a policy document. Okay, then now if I look at the JSON equivalent of this, it's going to tell me, okay, this is the JSON notation, right? I'm sure all of you are aware of what JSON is. It's a very common syntactical method to represent resources and transfer data. It's equivalent to like what an XML does, right? I mean, XML used to be the standard de facto. Now JSON has become very, very popular. JSON, YAML, so these have become quite popular. Okay, so now within this, there's something called a version. So you can just give a date here. I think it just makes it 17/10/2012. That's okay. You can leave it as it is, or you can just give a version to it. And then there's a statement, right? So this is where the statement actually begins in square brackets. So then again, you have curly brackets, then you have a key value pair, SID. You can just give some name to the SID here, saying that allow only EC2. Okay, allow EC2 : star resource star, right? Which means that you're allowing all actions in EC2. Okay, and resources, any resource. So it's asterisk means that it's a wildcard, correct? Anything. Okay, so it allows all the actions in EC2 and it allows all the resources in EC2, right? It does not restrict, but it's only we're allowing EC2 through this, right? So next, click on next tags, add a tag, just say name, allow only EC2 policy. That's the name that I've given. Next, review this and give the same, allow only EC2 policy. Can't have spaces. Okay, just give this and you'll see a summary of it. EC2 full access all resources, right? So that's what it does, and I've given a tag and just create this policy. Okay, perfect. The policy has been created. So now if you see here, first you will get all the customer managed policies, right? Which are created by this user in this account, right? So these are not visible to other accounts. Okay, it's only visible only to, because the moment you see it's customer managed, it's only visible in this account. Whereas if it is AWS managed, it's global. It can be visible to you, me, anyone else as well across the world. Okay, so now if you see here, this is the policy we just created, allow only EC2 policy. So now go back, and what you can do is just refresh this. Since the policy is created, so now you can actually search for that, right? Allow only EC2 policy. Select this allow only EC2 policy, click on next review. Yeah, and then add the permission. So now there's a managed policy called allow only EC2 policy is available. And if you just expand this, it will show you the policy summary in JSON format. It will say allow EC2 : star and all the resources, right? Okay, so now let me go back to my RPL user and let me just refresh this so that it will fetch the new policy that was created, a new policy that was associated. So then let me click on EC2. Yeah, if you see, then I will not get that error any longer. Earlier, I got an error saying you do not have permissions to access this resource, correct? So now I don't have that problem, right? I'm able to access it, and then I'll be able to launch an instance, right? I can do all of that. I'll be able to launch an instance. Okay. So now the second postulate is satisfied, where originally I never had any access. So now I'm giving an explicit allow, which means that I have written a statement that says allow EC2 : on all the resources. So this is an explicit allow. So the explicit allow overrides the default deny, right? And we have seen that. Now I'm able to access EC2 console without any issues. Okay, so rule number 2 is satisfied. Perfect. Okay, got it. Let's come to rule number 3. So now I'm going back to my RPL admin, and I'm going back to my RPL user definition, right? Where I have an explicit allow only on EC2 for RPL user in the policy. Okay, so now I'm going to add one more policy to this that says, I'll just go ahead and add one more policy. So this time I will not create a new policy. Instead, I will add something called an inline policy, which will be directly associated with this user. Okay. Whereas if you create a policy, you can associate this policy with any number of users, any number of groups, any number of roles. Okay. But if I want to quickly attach some policy only to this particular guy, only to this user, I can also do an inline policy. The behavior is the same, one and the same. But the only thing is that the scope of this policy, this inline policy, will be only available inline within that only user. Okay, that's the reason I'm just trying all sorts of things so that you understand it. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say EC2. Okay, I'm going to say all actions, but this time I'm going to deny, not allow. Let me just go ahead and switch to deny permissions. I've just denied. And I'm going to come to resources. And I'm going to say all resources. Okay, and let's look at the JSON. Yeah, here instead of allow, it's deny this time. Let me just review the policy and just create a policy. I'll say deny only EC2. Just create the policy. Yeah. So if you see, I've got an allow here, allow all EC2, and at the same time, I've also got a deny, which says deny all EC2. The only difference between these two is only this allow and deny. The rest all is one and the same, correct? Forget about this. SID is just a name. Okay, you can give any name here, but effect, action, and resource, it's all one and the same except for effect where it's allow, whereas it's deny here. So now I have explicitly denied. Let me go back and let me refresh. Look at this. You're not authorized to perform this operation. So now my third rule is satisfied. I have a explicit allow. I'm overriding my explicit allow using an explicit deny. So the first thing that it looks for is an explicit deny when it evaluates the policies. And when it evaluates permissions, it will first look for any explicit deny. The moment it has an explicit deny effect in any of the policy statements in the attached policies, it'll simply close its eyes and blindly deny. It won't look at, oh, okay, there's also an allow. No, it doesn't look for allow. If there is an explicit deny, it just goes ahead and explicitly denies everything. So I won't be able to do anything on EC2 now, right? Because I'm like, see, I'll get all errors here, and I'll not be able to do anything out here. Issue encountered fetching data, which means it's a authorization related error. Okay, so the third rule is also taken care of. Was there a question? I think somebody has to go on mute. Please go on mute. Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's how it works. Okay. So I hope you understand it. So first we started with a clean slate. We had no policies, nothing. We just created a user and we had nothing. Then when we logged in a different browser, use a different browser altogether. In this case, my admin is in Firefox and my RPL user is in Chrome, right? So that the cookies don't Otherwise, if you try every time you have to log out, log in. So don't do that. Use 2 different browsers and do it side by side. So first I started with a clean slate. So the first rule is, by default, AWS denies every action. So when I logged in as the RPL user, I was not able to perform any action on any service whatsoever. So then what I did was I added an explicit allow only on EC2 for all the resources, for all the actions. Then I was able to access only EC2. So then what I did was I applied the third rule, which is the third postulate, which is the explicit deny. Even though there was an explicit allow, I gave an explicit deny, which took the precedence, which is the topmost precedence. In this case, this is like the Supreme Court order. Supreme Court order has come into effect. Nobody can, violate the Supreme Court order. That takes the topmost precedence. Okay, so these are the 3 things that you need to understand. Okay, so do this assignment for today. Okay, I'm going to give you a small document of this. I'll come back to this. Okay, so that's IAM users. Okay, so now roles. Let's also quickly look at roles. We are running out of time. Okay, so now what is a role? A role is something which you can't log in using a role, right? I mean, but you can assume a role. A role is like wearing the hat, right? I mean, we always say that I'm wearing the hat of, usually when we do role plays, we wear the hat of other person and we do a role play, correct? So it's the same role. It's a very similar role, right? And you can say that, I mean, if you're playing a small game, and within that game, right, I mean, you have been asked to enact like, enact like our former Honorable President APJ Abdul Kalam, right? So you'll actually wear the hat of APJ Abdul Kalam and you will enact like him, right? Like the way he speaks and the way he gives motivation to youngsters, right? So it's like that, right? So you just wear the hat of somebody, right? So that's called role. So in this case, very similar, right? You also can create a new role. Let me just create a new role. Okay, so now when you create a role, okay, before we create a role, let's just go into definition of, what is a role. AWS IAM role. Just going into the user guide. Okay, an IAM role is an IAM identity that you can create in your account that has specific permissions. Perfect. An IAM role is similar to an IAM user in that it is an AWS identity with permission policies that determine what the identity can and cannot do in AWS. However, instead of being uniquely associated with one person, a role is intended to be assumable by anyone who needs it. Okay, any principal can basically assume a role. Okay, I think somebody has to go on mute, please. Okay, so any principal can actually use it, right? I mean, it can be a IAM user, right? Or it can be an API call. It can assume a role. Also, a role does not have standard long-term credentials such as a password or access keys associated with it. Instead, when you assume a role, it provides you with temporary security credentials for your role session. Going back to my example, when you are enacting like Dr. Kalam, right? For that particular 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you're actually assuming his role and you're enacting like him, correct? So that's applicable to any stage dramas or any roles that you do, right? And movies or anything, right? So you don't have that identity for a long period of time, right? You have that identity for a very short period of time, but apart from that, you are you, right? Your own self, right? Whatever. If I'm going to play the role of a doctor, right? So then I basically, once I get onto the stage, then I play the role of the doctor and I come out of it. I come out as Prasanna, right? So similarly, even here, a role does not have standard long-term credentials such as a password or access key. Instead, when you assume the role, you take that role's permissions and through you, the role becomes active. Okay, it's very, very important. The role is not active by itself, right? but through you, the role becomes active. Okay, like how we see Bahubali through Prabhas, but otherwise, none of us have seen Bahubali, or rather, Bahubali is a imaginary character, right? So, but for us, Bahubali is Prabhas, correct? So Prabhas is the identity for us, whereas Bahubali is the role. Okay, that's how it works. All right, you can use roles to delegate access to users, applications, or services that don't normally have access to your AWS resources. For example, you want to grant users in your AWS account access to resources they usually don't have, or grant users in one AWS account to resource in another account. Okay, you might actually do that. Okay, all right. Okay, fair enough. So let's do one thing. Let's just go back and create a new role. Okay, so now when you create a role, you have to select an AWS service that is allowed to use that role on your behalf. Okay, so this is something that you have to do, or it can be any other AWS account, because you can also authorize another AWS account to access resources in your AWS account using a role, or it can be a web identity, like you can use an OpenID based provider to assume role, or it can be a SAML 2.0 federation, right? A security assertion markup language. It's called SAML, right? I mean, these days, an authentication that you do, a federated authentication that you do, like for example, you use your Facebook IDs, Google IDs, Amazon IDs to access other services also, right? In such cases, there's a SAML 2.0 token which is generated, and that's a federation that happens there, right? You can also use that. But anyways, I mean, these are advanced topics. Let me not get into that. Only the thing is that AWS service is there and you have an EC2. You select an EC2 as a service who can access the role on your behalf. Okay, that's the whole crux of it, right? An EC2 instance will be able to access this role, assume this role, and perform actions on the behalf of this role. That's the way you have to look at it. Okay, when I select an EC2 or a Lambda, either an EC2 or a Lambda or any of these services will be able to assume the permissions that are defined in this role on your behalf. Okay, in this case, let it be EC2. Next, I'm just going to say, in this case, I want my EC2 to be able to access my S3 bucket, right? I can just say S3. I can give only S3 full access to my EC2. Or my EC2 instance wants to be able to access all my resources, AWS resources. It can then be administrator access, right? So let me just do this way, S3 full access, and then click on next, add tags. Because when we come to the S3 tutorial, we will revoke this and we will come back to this, okay? So that's how I'm linking each section to another section, okay? Name, I'm just going to give a name as access S3 from EC2 role. So this is, remember this name, we will come back to this when we access the S3 lab. When we start S3 tomorrow, we will come back to this. Okay, so next review and give the same access S3 from EC2 role, right? So that's the role that I'm creating. It has got S3 full access. Just create this role. Yeah, I've just created a role, which is access S3 from EC2 role. Okay, and it has got S3 full access in it. And you know what? When we create an EC2 instance, when we provision an EC2 instance, we can actually attach this role to that EC2 instance. So I can just go launch instances. This one, t2.micro. Okay, so here, out here, if I come down, if you see this IAM role here, when I select this, I will see this role here, access S3 from EC2 role. The moment I attach this role to this EC2 instance, and the moment the EC2 instance gets provisioned, from that EC2 instance, I will be able to perform S3 calls, S3 API calls. And I'll be able to access the S3 objects and S3 API calls. But before that, you know, I have to introduce you to S3. So now remember this when we, tomorrow when we start S3 and when we do lab exercises for S3, this point will be revisited, right? That role that we created today will be revisited. But remember that a role is nothing but it's basically a way to assume such set of permissions where it can be assumed by one of the AWS services on your behalf. Okay, because when you do programmatically, when you access S3, it is not, you're not going to use your username password, right? You have to basically delegate that to someone else, right? So in this case, you are delegating your permissions to someone else so that that guy can perform actions on your behalf. Okay, so that's the way you have to look at it. That's called the role. Don't worry about role. I mean, role, you will be able to understand role better when we start with S3 and other subjects. But for now, for today, I want all of you to create a new user using your first using the first IAM user that you created in the initial days, the first 1 or 2 days. You're always using that only. Don't use your root credentials. Okay, I'll just give you a small assignment. I don't know if I have this documented, but no worries. I'm just going to create it right away. Today is 16th December 2021. IAM users policies. Okay, so let's just go ahead and first is assignment, right? So assignment for today is log into AWS account using your IAM user, which has admin privileges, which was created on day 1. Okay. Knock off all this. Okay, which was created on day 1. Next is, once you log in, create a new IAM user. Okay, log IAM console or screen. When I say console, it's screen. Create a new IAM user named RPL user or any name, right? I'm just giving RPL user. Okay, so out here, what you have to do is add users. RPL user. Select the access key, select the password, give a custom password. And uncheck this. I'll insert the screenshot. Okay, let's take this. Okay, so then next step is for download the CSV file when prompted, which will have the access key and secret key. This will be the last time you will be downloaded. Otherwise, you won't be able to download it. Okay. Next step is next permissions. Okay. The next This comes later. The next permissions, don't attach any permission, right? So just leave it blank. Next screen for permissions, don't attach any permission and click on next. Okay, give a tag, review, click on review and create user. Okay, when prompted, just download the thing. Right? Okay, now as a next step, log in to another browser window. Browser window and use the using the new user that was created. Okay, try and access various services. You should get not authorized error. Okay, so now go back to the admin user and open the RPL user, IAM user. Yeah, so out here in the permissions, you can add a new permission. Under permissions, add a new permission. Okay, add a permission. So out there, select attach existing policies directly. Select attach existing policies directly and click on create policy. Create policy. Okay, which will open this in the new window. So out there in the click on new policy there, choose service as EC2. EC2, choose actions as all actions. All actions. Okay, and choose resources as. Just navigate like this. Okay, choose resources as all resources. As all resources. Okay, so then review the JSON. Review the JSON should be like this. It should be like below. Okay, so now you can try refresh the RPL user browser session and you should be able to access EC2 resources, EC2 service. Okay, so now this completes the second thing. For the third one, go back to the same admin. Instead of this, it should be deny. Okay. I'm just giving rule number 1 starts here. And the rule number 2 this is rule number 2. The 2, okay. Then the rule number 3 starts here. So, so now here, okay. So now when you go back to users, select the RPL user under permissions. Instead of add permissions, click on add inline policy. Add inline policy. Add inline policy. Okay, so here, when you click on add inline policy, you will get the same thing, right? Remove all of this. Okay. So here you just say choose a service as EC2. So instead of actions, so here just select EC2. Yeah, under actions, you have to switch to deny permissions. Under actions, switch to deny permissions. Okay, choose all actions and all of this. So here, instead of this, it should be deny. Okay, that should be the only difference. Then add it. So then go back and refresh the RPL user browser session. You should not be able to. This is rule number 3. You should now not be able to access EC2. Okay, so this is what I want you to do today. Okay, so now you can just Google for the IAM, you have the links. So I'm just going to give you this document for today. Just do this in the breakout rooms, and I will see you all tomorrow.
Anna, sir, do you want to make that announcement?